Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course, and it's called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Mark Herschberg, and he is a fractional CTO. He's also author of the book, The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. I'm curious to learn more about his progression to CTO, the motivation for his book, and the ways in which public speaking has benefited his work life. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Mark.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mark, I did a bit of research on you and I saw you have a bunch of degrees. So your first degrees were in physics, electrical engineering, and computer science. You're quite the achiever. So what was the motivation for getting all those degrees?
I had trouble making up my mind. I liked physics, I liked computer science, and I just wanted to do it as much as I could all at once.
Wow, and then I also saw that you got a master's too. So you weren't even done after undergrad. You went and even got an advanced degree. What was the motivation for that?
I really liked cryptography, which is a branch of mathematics or computer science that deals with cybersecurity and secret codes, basically based on mathematical principles. So I wanted to study that. I wound up leaving with just my master's. I didn't go on for a PhD, but you can't do that kind of work at the undergrad level.
Gotcha. So your interest in physics and electrical engineering, computer science, is that something that you brought into school, or did you develop those interests once you were there?
That started early on. I got interested in physics when I was 9 years old. And then computer science, I first learned about programming in ninth grade, thanks to my high school guidance counselor. And so both of those passions stayed with me. I also at the time had an interest in law, but that faded over time. And thankfully, I didn't go into that area.
Oh man, there's more than enough lawyers anyway. Yeah, I think you made the right decision. But then eventually you go through undergrad, you get a master's degree, and now it's time to enter the working world. What kind of work did you do when you left school?
I first spent a year as research staff at MIT, but after that, I wound up joining a startup company as a software developer. And early in my career, I was writing software at basically companies during the dot-com era back in Boston.
Oh, wow. So going to a startup, was that something that you were looking to do? I know a lot of times when people come out of school, especially in those type of degrees, they're looking to work at those big companies, Microsoft, Apple, that type of thing. Was a startup something that you were looking to do?
Yeah, you raise a good point. It wasn't. I had been looking around, and typically at the time, the options were go to a big company, Microsoft, IBM were the big ones at the time. That didn't feel right to me. Wall Street recruited heavily from MIT. I didn't want to go into finance. And then you had the big consulting companies like McKinsey and Accenture. Those didn't feel right either. And so I wound up going to a startup basically by process of elimination. It wasn't what I wanted. I said, well, nothing else seems to be working. But it turned out that was the right fit for me. I'm so glad I wound up there because I love doing startups.
Okay, nice. What about startups really appealed to you after you'd been in one?
For me, I like the idea that it has lots of uncertainty and there's not a lot of structure. I'm a very self directed person. And by going into these companies, I could take the initiative and increase my experience and responsibilities. There's no one there to say, no, no, that belongs to some other department. Everyone's saying, I wish we had more help. So as long as you get your work done, you can kind of step outside the bounds of your job and say, well, how can I help you? And gain a lot more experience that way.
Yeah, you know what, Mark, I'm with you on that. So I've actually worked at a number of startups too, and that's one of the things I really like about them is the fact that you have that ability to potentially wear a number of hats, and you don't get pigeonholed into one area. This is what you do, and this is what you'll do until told otherwise. I really like the fact that at startups you get to experience different things for sure.
Absolutely. And it can vary from big versus small or one company to another. It depends on what you want. But I know for me, it was startups.
Nice. So then eventually you moved up to the point where you're a CTO. What was that progression like?
Early in my career, I realized I wanted to become the CTO. And I still love programming in the same way I still love working with Legos. Legos are fun, but I don't play with Legos the way I used to when I was younger because the problem sets that you get with Legos, it's very formalized. It's put the blocks together in a certain way. Same thing with coding. It's fun. You put things together, you compose them to make a really interesting system, but it's a very structured type of problem set. The people problems that you get when you go into management, the strategy problems, those are a lot less structured. And I was really interested in pursuing those. So early in my career, I set my sights on becoming a CTO. Although I realized early on, being a CTO didn't just mean being the best software developer. In fact, to be honest, I'm not as good a software developer today as I used to be. But it did mean developing other skills like hiring people, managing, budgeting, even public speaking were all skills I knew I had to develop if I wanted to qualify as a CTO.
Nice. Hey, at least you were, starting off in your career, and you said you were always looking to be a CTO. You realized that not necessarily being the best technical person would be the avenue to getting to that position. You're right. There's a whole lot of non-technical skills that you have to develop in order to get to that position. What type of things did you do to develop those non-technical skills?
Back then, there weren't a lot of resources. This was basically around the year 2000. And so the internet didn't have as developed a World Wide Web at the time. So there weren't a lot of online resources. Mostly I was reading books. I went to a couple groups where I could learn from more senior people. But I really had to learn a lot of this on my own. And when I realized it wasn't just me who hadn't learned this, because unfortunately we don't teach these skills in school, I began to work on a training program to teach other engineers at my company how they could develop these skills.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. I mean, school really prepares us with more of the technical expertise, and not even that. Sometimes, by the time you get into the working world, what you even learned in school might be obsolete in terms of computer programs, that type of thing. So you're continuously learning, and you kind of have to have the mindset of just being an eternal learner. But then when you moving into management, there's even more learning to take on, and that's something, as I mentioned, you didn't get in school. So the fact that you knew that early on, kudos to you for that, for sure.
Thanks. I think I got a little lucky having some really good managers as examples and being able to have access to some good books and recommendations that got me started. But this is a problem, as you know, many of us face because schools don't teach it. And particularly when we go from being an individual contributor to that first level manager, because going from a junior developer to a mid-level to a senior developer, it's just being better at those technical skills, right? Whatever type of engineering, when you're an individual contributor, it's being a better engineer, being better and faster at solving the problems. When you take that step into management, it's a whole different set of problems that you probably haven't dealt with at all. And so it can be a rough transition for people who aren't well prepared for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's so companies can really mess that up in a lot of instances where they think the most technical person, okay, we're going to make you a manager, but just because you're a great technical person doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager of people. And if anything, those two skills have nothing to do with one another. You may just move up into a role that you're ill-equipped for. Absolutely. So go ahead.
The funny thing, they lose a great technical person and then potentially get a bad manager. And here's the real irony. If they said we're bringing in a new technology, what are they going to do? They're going to say, we're going to send you to training. We're going to buy you some books, send you to a course. We know we have to train you up for a new technology. When they promote you to manager, so many companies give you zero training, absolutely none, which is truly heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like, okay, now you got to figure it out. Like people, honestly, when I think a lot of people think about becoming a manager and moving into those type of positions, they're really concerned with the pay raise for sure, and then also the added responsibility. You get to go to the cocktail hours and hand out your card that says you're a manager. You might feel really great about yourself, that validation you might get from others. But then there's the actual work of managing people. People bring their problems to work, and you have to be the ones to deal with them. And honestly, that's the main reason I never really cared to take on that type of role, because I don't want to. I have my own problems that I'm dealing with. I don't want to deal with other people's problems. So, kudos to people like you that'll take on that responsibility for sure.
Every manager I know says the people part is the hardest part of managing.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I mentioned in the intro that you're a fractional CTO. What does that mean?
When I wanted to get the book out, I knew I needed to take some time to promote the book, so I couldn't commit to going back full time to a company. Fractional CTOs, like a fractional CFO, are executives who spend a little time with multiple companies. Many startup companies, they come and they say, oh, we need a CTO. In fact, they don't. Because if you're an early stage startup, or maybe a later stage company, but not a core software technical company, what you need are people to do the work. You need to hire a bunch of software developers. The CTO who does the big strategy, who does the overall planning, that might not be a full-time job. And so for these startups, they say, oh, yeah, we have 5 programmers, we need a CTO. Well, no, because I'm slow at coding these days. I'm pretty rusty, and you're going to spend a lot of money for me to code. That's not a great use of my time. What you want is to bring someone like me on when we're doing the strategy, the management, the hiring, all these other pieces. For many companies, because it's not a full-time job, you bring someone like me in maybe 10 hours a week, maybe 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week. And we come on board and we can check what the developers are doing, give them support, help with technology selection. And you're only paying for what you really need from a CTO, and you're not spending the extra money where we're not being useful.
Gotcha. So at what point do these companies tend to say, okay, the fractional CEO was cool, but now we're at a point where we need a full-time CTO? What needs to happen for that to happen?
They expand to a certain point, the team size grows, the velocity of getting the software or the product out, or just the complexity of the system with the strategy, with the partnerships, where you just need that high level executive more and more. And you start to say, once it's over about 50, 60%, you're probably accelerating and saying, we're going to need someone soon enough anyway. Let's get the person on board.
Gotcha. And I mean, this might, I'm sure this varies, but typically, how long does it take from a company to hire, from hiring a fractional CTO to then having the need to have a CTO?
There's no clear time frame for, oh, you have this for 6 months and then the next person at this point. How long it takes them to hire? Well, how long it takes to hire a CTO, that's typically a 3 to 6 month process depending on the company, because obviously you need to find the right fit in terms of capabilities, but then also the right fit in terms of industry and culture and getting along with the other executives. And that's a long, slow process. Sometimes they will say, well, we've had a fractional CTO working with us, and if there's interest from both sides, it can convert into a full-time.
Gotcha. I mentioned in the intro that you wrote a book, and I'm curious to find out the motivation for the book, and then also what you hope people will get from it.
Well, this goes back to what I realized when I wanted to become a CTO, that there are all these skills, leadership, teamwork, communications, networking, negotiations that we're never taught, but we need to be effective as we get more senior. And so after I had developed this program for my team, I found out MIT was developing a similar program. I reached out to them, said, can I help? I've got some materials. So I helped MIT develop a career success accelerator there. I've been teaching there for the past 20 years. But of course, these problems aren't just for MIT students. It's not only MIT students who hadn't been learning this. In fact, it's not even just STEM people. All of us have this. So I said, how can we get this content out to make it more widely available? And that's why I put into the book, the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. So it covers career plans, how to work effectively, managing your manager, fitting into corporate culture, how to interview, not simply as a candidate, but as a hiring manager, because no one ever teaches that, but we all hire. Leadership, management, communications, negotiation, networking, and ethics. It's all covered in the book.
Yeah. Even remembering going on interviews and sitting through them, you get the sense that there are some interviewers that prepared for them more so than others. Others is just kind of like, yeah, let me look at your resume. Yeah, it's okay, whatever. But then, and then others, they may ask you questions that you think, what does this have to do with anything? But yeah, if people actually take that kind of job seriously, because it should be taken seriously. I mean, you're bringing somebody into your organization that could potentially torch the culture, because companies have these unique cultures, and you want to bring in people that will acclimate themselves to the culture and not be a detriment to it. So it would behoove these companies to do a better job at preparing the interviewers to be effective interviewers. And so if you have a book, or if they have a book or some sort of resource like yours that they can refer to better themselves in that effort, I mean, I don't see that as being anything but a positive for sure.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, as you point out, it's so important. Getting the right person can have such a positive impact and the wrong person a negative one. We have zero training. If you spend even just an hour or two training your team how to be more effective, the returns are massive. And yet we don't do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So As you may know, the scope of this podcast is public speaking. It's something I'm really passionate about, especially working as an engineer. And I used to have to give presentations in front of management, and I wasn't very good at it. I noticed the other engineers weren't all that much better at it than I was. So I really took a keen interest in myself getting better at it, and then seeing what I could do to help others like me get better at it. So it's really why I like talking to people like yourself who come from the STEM fields about public speaking. So when it comes to public speaking, I'm sure that that's something that executives should be good at, because they have to communicate to their teams what they want, what the strategy of the company is. So when it comes to public speaking, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
I used to be horrible at it. Back in high school and middle school, when they'd have us do a presentation, I would just look down at my page and I'd kind of mumble and I'd shake. I'd never make eye contact. And it was truly a horrible public speaking experience, but I knew I needed to get better. I started by joining the debate club in high school. That helped a bit. I looked for chances to practice. I looked at people who were good and said, what is it that this person does and how can I incorporate that? Ironically, one of the best things was when I joined the MIT ballroom dance team. I was a competitive dancer for years. Now, in ballroom dancing, you're not actually speaking, you're on the floor dancing. But the important thing that happened, what holds so many of us back when public speaking, is confidence, right? It's that fear of, oh, I'm going to screw up, I'm going to do something wrong, everyone's going to laugh at me. Well, when you're on the ballroom dance floor and you're competing, you're literally being judged. There are judges there rating you. And I've had good rounds where I felt, yeah, I nailed it. And there are rounds where I thought, oh my God, that was so horrible, so embarrassing. And people saw and they rated me poorly, but it's okay, right? I got through it. Life went on. And that confidence of, yeah, I've screwed up and I just keep going means when I do public speaking now, I don't have that fear. And we have to learn skills like projecting our voice, making eye contact, hand gestures are important, but really it comes down to confidence. I think that's at the core of so many things. And you get that from practice. And that could be through doing Toastmasters or other great public speaking groups, could be from doing ballroom or stand-up comedy or acting classes or even sports. Anything that just gives you the confidence to go out, make mistakes, and keep going is really going to be at the core of your public speaking.
Hmm. Well, this is the first time on this podcast I ever heard about ballroom dancing, but it's a first for everything. That's excellent. But I think you're absolutely right, Mark, when it comes to public speaking or a lot of things when you have to do something in front of people, as long as you're able to build up the confidence to do it and just know that you'll live to see another day. You're not going to die, even though I think it's 70+% of people have this fear of public speaking. It's going to be okay, and with practice you certainly get more comfortable doing it.
And public speaking, it's so important for our careers. There's the obvious examples. You point out as an exec, well, yes, I need to go speak to my teams. I need to speak to other execs. I go to conferences and present. I go on podcasts. Being able to communicate effectively helps me stand out, helps me get recognized and known. But in fact, we do public speaking far more often than we think. When you're in a meeting, we normally think public speaking is, okay, Mark's going to get up and present and stand at the front of the room. But even as we're sitting around the table and we're debating an idea, and I say, hold on, everyone, let me propose something. Here's what we should do. We should do this, this, this. Here's why we should do it. And I give a spontaneous 60-second, 2-minute talk. That is a form of public speaking. Because if I did that, but I just kind of mumbled a little, no one's going to listen to the idea. Right now, it might not be planned. I might not be at a podium, but I'm using the public speaking skills. Even interviewing is a part of public speaking. You're using a lot of the same skills. It's just in a slightly different format. So getting better at public speaking is going to help us in so many aspects of our career.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Mark. It isn't just about getting up at a podium and talking to an audience. Yeah, even if you're at a meeting, if you don't project that kind of confidence in communicating your ideas, they're likely not going to get implemented. and a lot of engineers probably know that from firsthand experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when it comes to presenting in front of people, do you ever get nervous? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I don't get nervous anymore, although it comes from, I think, experience. I certainly did before, but here's a great trick you can use. This comes from my friend Olivia Fox Caban. She wrote a wonderful book called The Charisma Myth. you can run a script in your head. Here's how it works. If you've ever been to a horror movie, you've watched the horror movie, you see the guy coming at you with an axe, your heart starts to race. Now, we know consciously there's no person with an axe. You're totally safe. No one's going to get you. But what happens is at a subconscious level in our brain, we see crazy man with an axe, and our system kicks in to say fight or flight. Our adrenaline goes. We've tricked our brain at the subconscious level. You can use that a different way. Before you go on to some event and you're getting a little nervous about going on, this, by the way, works for interviews as well. If you're a little nervous walking into the room, close your eyes and visualize something that calms you. For me, it was thinking about my cat growing up. It could be your teddy bear when you were a kid. It could be getting off the plane, seeing your parents, loved ones, sitting in a meadow, whatever it is that makes you relaxed and happy. Close your eyes, spend 30 to 60 seconds just visualizing yourself there. And just like you got tricked by that slasher film, your subconscious will get tricked by these images and relax your body. And that's going to put you in a much better state when you go on stage.
I'm a big fan of visualization, Mark, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. You're absolutely right. If you visualize yourself, I like to visualize myself doing well. So if I visualize myself doing well, I think it's more likely that I'm going to do well. But if you go into something thinking I'm going to mess up, I'm going to mess up, I'm going to mess up, yeah, you probably will mess up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So these have been really great tips that you've offered, Mark. I mean, I really like the one about practice. I really like the one about visualization. Is there any other tips that you could offer to help the people watching or listening in becoming more effective at public speaking?
Practice, practice, practice. There is a type of learning paradigm, and there's 4 stages. It goes from unconsciously unknowing to consciously unknowing to consciously knowing to unconsciously knowing. What does that mean? At first, we make mistakes. So let's take a common example, the ums. So, I'm just kind of saying this. I don't even realize I'm doing it. Then all of a sudden you point out to me, I say, oh, okay. And, I just said again. Okay. And there it is. So now I'm still doing it. At least I'm conscious of it. Then I can work to address that, right? And there's different techniques you can use. And so now, okay, I am not saying but I'm being very deliberate and careful. And then with practice, you get to, now I can just speak. I never have to worry about dropping an in there. We've all done this. For example, you take driving. At 3 years old, you didn't know how to drive. At 7, you said, okay, I don't know how to drive. At 16, 17, you knew how to drive, but you were very, okay, 10 and 2, and let's be very careful, and don't talk to me, you can't distract me. To then as an adult, we say, yeah, I'm going to drive, I'm going to listen to the radio, hold a conversation, because it's built in. And we can do that with many skills, including public speaking. But it starts by saying, I'm unconsciously unknowing, and then moving to the next level. So get some feedback, become consciously conscious of your unknowing, and then start to address those one by one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't really acknowledge a problem. You can't really work on a problem until you acknowledge it. That's for sure. So that's excellent advice. Thank you for that. This has been really interesting and enjoyable for me to having this conversation with you, Mark. How can people get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. You can learn more about the book. You can get in touch with me. There's also a free app that has great tips for public speaking and many of the other skills I mentioned. And then there's a whole resource page with other books and other tools that can help you succeed, all at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is Teach the Geek to Speak. It's a public speaking course. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.